for the sake of perhaps you're coming back to this after Christmas and you want a bit of revision, or maybe you haven't been here at all and this is your first session or whatever, just to kind of go from the ground up to where we sort of arrived at, I hope. I'm going to start from the basics. Before I do that, I'm just going to answer a quick question on Teams. Anyway, I'll press on. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, following on from the Teams chat, and just so you're aware, this is probably going to be about half to 3/4 of an hour before I kind of call an end to things, which is probably long enough, to be honest, for something like this, because there won't be any stopping and very much questioning. It'll just be me going through end to end. This is quite a lot of information to take in one go. So the idea here is that we're looking at this from a getting started. Oh, okay. Maybe if I make my mic closer to my face. There's no gain control on this mic, so yeah, it's not very good. Get it really close. No, you can't see my face. Okay, hopefully that's a little better. Yeah, the idea is to go from the ground up. The first thing we looked at was the two main views in Ableton, which are the session view, which is the one it defaults to when you start the program, and the arrangement view. And the session view is obviously, as much as it being a kind of musical arrangement tool, it's also a mixer. I like this view. I think it's great. And you can do a lot with it. Also, just to give you a little bit of context, I'm sat here in my not studio with a little controller keyboard, which is not that dissimilar to the ones we've got in the lab. It's just a bit smaller. So I might do some stuff on remote control in a minute, but I'll demo that as I'm doing it. When I'm looking down at this as well, I'm looking at my notes, not just sort of falling asleep. So let's look at getting stuff going in session view. Here we've got the template project. It's 2 MIDI tracks and 2 audio tracks. It's relatively straightforward to find some sounds and put them into audio tracks as clips. We were looking previously at just the sort of core library stuff inside Ableton's library. For example, there's a whole lot of loops of different kinds, so we can grab these and we can put them into a track. I have no idea what this is going to sound like. It might be a bit loud. Alright, yeah, that sounds awesome. So we can just drag that into an empty clip like that. When it comes to MIDI, you probably find fewer in the way of MIDI clips, so that the typical workflow is that you find an instrument that makes a sound and then you either input or record MIDI for that sound. So a good example would be my favourite synth in, by favourite I mean the one I know how to use in Ableton, which is analog. So if I play a few keys on the keyboard, we can hear a sound. Maybe just make it sound a bit less rubbish. If you wanted to record some stuff in a clip, we click on the clip record button. As soon as you do that, you'll hear the metronome, and then it will start recording, which is a bit panic-inducing. And the way the clip works is that it will keep recording until you press stop. And the stop button is now actually in the clip. So, well, let me just demonstrate this. So, pull the tempo down a bit. The perfect tempo is 114 BPM. So if I'm stopped, I'll get a count in. If I'm running, if the transport's running, it will drop into record on the next whatever value this is. So this is quite a significant thing in Ableton. So the default here is the global quantize is 1 bar, meaning that if I'm running and then press record here, recording will start on the next bar, and then if I press stop, if I stop recording there, the stop action happens on the bar as well. This is clearly designed to be used as working in a way that's like an improvisational tool. And one thing we can do, perhaps, is assign clip slots to keys on the keyboard, on the QWERTY keyboard, or on the physical keyboard, so that we can drop things in and out with a control surface. My favourite approach is to make this longer. So if I make it 2 bars, I give myself a little bit more time, and if I'm paying attention, I can drop it into record. That's great. I can drop it into record with enough time to give myself, time to arrange my hands on the keyboard or whatever. There's another way of putting MIDI information in, which is if I double click to make an empty clip, I can go into draw mode. This is probably better illustrated with some drums. So let's go to packs, drums, and then just drag a drum kit in. I'm not doing this with any real direction, so just a drum kit will do. Sounds good. Creating an empty clip on a track with a drum rack on it will give me the drum names down the side here, which is useful. There we go. Now, if I hit Command B or press this little pencil icon thingy up here, I can draw notes onto the clip. So Command B, let's put some stuff in. Stop everything else for now and hear what's going on there. It's quite a nice workflow in the sense that when you click on a note you've created, it will disappear again. You get the idea. There's another way of doing recording into an empty clip, or in fact into an empty piece on the arrangement, which I'll come on to in a second, and that is step recording. So step recording is a means of recording. It's not like clicking on the screen, it's a means of recording music in step by step, so you can consider what's going to happen next. I'll try and demonstrate it rather than talking about it. That would make more sense, wouldn't it? So if I make a new empty clip slot, there's a little sort of hidden layer of functionality here as follows. So if I go up to my key mapping option up here, Brandon, always looking for the shortcut. If I go to the key option up here, the key mapping up here, not that one, that one. You notice at the top of the sounds list on the key editor here, 2 arrows appear, which weren't there before. We can map these arrows to keys on the keyboard. So I'm going to map. Weirdly, you can't map them to the cursor keys. I don't know what it is. I'm going to map left to 1 on my computer keyboard and right to 2. Now I can step forwards 1 step, and it's dependent on the current resolution on the grid here. So I'm at 16th beat right now, so I can step forwards and backwards. Now if I happen to press a note like a bass drum and then step forwards, that note will get pasted in. Then maybe what I can do is do that some more. This might not suit everyone, but it's a really kind of old school way of pasting in musical information. Let's put some snare drums in. It's a little bit awkward. If you've done this in Logic Pro or another DAW, they've not made it as fluid as it could be, but it's a nice feature to have. So that's step recording. On the chords thing, if I just switch to analog here, that will work with chords. So if I have an empty clip slot here, still got the same mapping going on, and I play a chord, thinks of a new chord. What's that? C minor 7th. Let's do an F. Somehow everything I sketch out in these sessions always sounds exactly the same. So that's step record. I learnt that this morning, so I'm quite happy to have a new skill. While I'm in the sort of area of recording and making patterns and stuff, something of note is quantize, which is often used for correction. Let's say I put in a really shoddy pattern. You can select the notes you just put in here. You can right click and quantize them, which you'll note is Command U. It's not always perfect, and it depends how badly you're playing your timing is. So a useful corrective tool, but something that's really of note is the groove pool and groove quantize. So over here we've got our groove pool, and we need to find some grooves to put in it, and the grooves are in Packs, Core Library, Swing and Groove. There's loads of them. I recommend though the MPC swing grooves, in particular MPC 16 swing, and there's loads of them, and they start at 53 and then go all the way down to 75. Just so you know what this means, a groove of 50 in MPC speak means the timing is between 16th notes is even. So each 16th note, let's say we're dividing this up, an 8th note up into 2, the 16th notes within that beat will occupy 50% of the space. Beyond 50, the second 16th note in that pair will be pushed backwards slightly. So MPC swing 75 means that within the space of 2 16th notes, the second one will be pushed back 75% of the way, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Watch this, I'll demonstrate it rather than trying to describe it. It seems futile describing things when I can literally just demonstrate them. Let's pull in a few of these grooves into the groove pool. Let's pull MPC swing 60, MPC swing 70, and MPC swing 75 into the groove pool. Now they're in the groove pool, they will appear down here on the clip. They will appear as grooves we can select for that clip. Initially, we can listen to the difference. So, given that this pattern here has got some notes that are on the 16th beat here, that kick drum there and that hi-hat there, those are the ones that are going to be affected by the groove. So let's choose swing 60. Switch it back to none. Let's choose swing 70. Let's switch it back to none, and then 75. Hopefully that difference is really apparent. The thing to say about that is it's at that point it's just playback. So if you want to kind of make the contents of the clip there actually inherit what the groove is telling it to do, we press commit, and as soon as I press commit, you'll notice the notes on the odd 16ths will shift back. In this case, that's supposed to represent 60% of the way. I don't exactly know how that works, but we can see they've shifted back slightly, and that's what a groove is. And like if I put in, let's just undo that, and if I put in loads of closed hi-hats, it will become really, really obvious. So that's the groove, and that's no groove. It's a real obvious difference. Listen out for it when you're doing your active listening. When you've got some time, listen out for grooves and swing and stuff. It's very, very common, and it tends to, unless you overdo it, it will tend to imbibe your music with forward motion and feel much more than a straight quantize will. Okay, I'm labouring points here, so it might well be that I defer some of this stuff to next time when I will have a little bit more time. One of my early challenges, I think, with learning Ableton was getting from this stuff to a state of, okay, so how do I actually arrange this? There's a few ways of doing it. Like, for example, what we could do is create our arrangement down the screen. So maybe like this is an intro section, and then maybe what we do is duplicate all these and change them slightly. So this is now a verse section, for want of a better way of saying it. And then you can trigger large chunks of the arrangement over here. So these are called scenes. So if I trigger that scene, it'll trigger everything along that line. So if you're careful about it, you can kind of build an arrangement up. I'm gesturing like you can see the screen, but you kind of build an arrangement up from top to bottom in session view. You can do interesting stuff with scenes, like if we name them, you could perhaps name these as different parts of a song. That's verse, that's chorus, I'm just pressing Command R to rename them. It's geared up for live performance, and what's kind of interesting is what you can do in here is you can type in BPMs and stuff and have the thing change BPM. So you'll see people with huge, great live sets geared up for live performance, with massive lists of clips ready to play, and then 3 or 4 songs down the whole session with different BPMs and everything. I quite like a left to right timeline though, kind of old fashioned like that. So there's a couple of ways of getting from one to the other. So for example, if I start recording on the session, which is the main record switch, anytime I trigger a clip, I hate that. Anytime I trigger a clip, that will then get recorded into the arrangement. So it's nice and easy to do it that way. So I found quite a nice workflow of just sort of making things in session view to sort of sketch around with, and then when I like them, recording them into the arrangements. Like the arrangement is the sort of the things I'm going to keep in a way. Equally, there's no reason why you can't grab clips and drag them straight across to the arrangement in this way. And then once you've got stuff in here, you can copy things and mute them and stuff, just as you would in any other DAW. Note a couple of things. Sometimes the session view takes precedent over the arrangement. So in this scenario, Ableton is using the session view as the kind of primary place that things are played. We can identify that this is the case with 2 things. The first thing is this little light here, which is called the back to arrangement button, is lit up, implying that the arrangement currently isn't in charge. And also on the arrangement, we get these trigger switches on each track with which we can switch individual tracks across to sort of the arrangement being in control. So if I press that on the analog track, this then becomes the active part of the arrangement. So it's almost like there's a mix between the 2 things. In this scenario, analog will come from my arrangement, but everything else is playing from the session. It can be a bit confusing to wrap your head around, but once you get it, it's quite interesting. Of course, there's no reason why you couldn't do all the things I just described in session view equally in arrangement view. So the record switch, the input monitoring, and everything else works in exactly the same way. So if you want to ignore session view completely, that is fine. A couple of things on session view that you can't do in the arrangement are to do with how clips are played. For example, we have these interesting features called follow actions. Now if I grab some sounds, what was I doing earlier on that was great? Let's do this folder here. Alright. What I'm going to do to demonstrate this is I'm going to select at random eight samples, and then I'm going to drag them all into 8 free clip slots. And then if I stop everything else, what we've got is, okay, there's a 2-bar lag here. What we've got is a bunch of sounds. Now each clip, as well as groove and warp settings and so on, has a follow action. So for example, if I make the follow action of clip 1 play the next one at a quantize, that's 1 bar there, say at a quantize of 1/16, I get, you can see that. Let's maybe make it a beat. Clip 1 automatically plays onto clip 2. Well, let's just select all of them, and in the follow actions say every single one play the next clip at a resolution of 1 beat. All of a sudden you've got a rhythmic pattern. I've seen Fortet, Kieran Hebden, do this, and he's got them mapped out on a launch pad. That's actually a monome because he's posh. And you can see the lights flicker across the top of the launch pad as these things get played. So it's quite an interesting way of doing sort of, you can create a pattern that's got its own sort of thing going on, but if you want to, every so often you can just interrupt it and get it to do something else. Also, we can select all of these clips, and instead of maybe next, maybe what we do is play any other clip. So then it'll be a random selection of things. If you're out of ideas and you want to just create something strange, it's quite a nice feature. It's also quite fun to look at. So follow actions are unique to the session view. You can't do that on the arrangement because it's sort of a non-linear way of doing things. There's also quite a nice feature on session view, which is this is another thing I learned today, is legato launching. So if you've got two clips, let's put another drum loop in here. You've got two clips in a track like this. Samples, loops, I don't know, that one. And you set them to trigger legato. You can do this thing. That's gone crazy, hasn't it? And then maybe let's set the quantization to be a quarter note, like that. You can do this thing. Well, instead of re-triggering 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 4. Instead of re-triggering, the transport will stay at the same point, and the next clip will trigger at the right place in the bar. So you can kind of get arrangements that loops that follow on from each other in a more natural musical way. I'm just showing you that because I learned it today. It's kind of fun. Okay, so that's session and arrange. So I suppose one thing to say about this is that, like, this is fine. This is fine. But it's a bit hectic to deal with, and like if we recorded that into the arrangement, what we'll end up with is loads of little chops, just playing individual clips at a high rate. What might be useful will be to bounce that across to another track. Again, there's a few ways of doing this, but here's one way. So if we create a new audio track and call it something useful like cuts, we can then send the audio is that going to work? I can send the audio from this one to this one. Meaning that if we get this track recording, we'll end up with a kind of physically rendered version of this track, which is probably easier to deal with. So getting from something that's live and moving to something that's a static piece of audio is quite a useful skill. And then if you record that into the arrangement, it'll be a lot cleaner. So hopefully that makes sense. I've got myself to a point here where I've just got a random array of stuff, so what I might do is just get rid of some of these tracks and and get down to something actually useful. So not that. Let's just go with that and the break for now, that'll be fine. You might find it useful to have some hands-on control over what's going on. So for example, if I drop a filter on my loop track there, so let's go for audio effects, auto filter, drop that onto the drum loop. Got some nice filter effects there. It's dead easy to map that to a control on your controller keyboard. For example, I'm going to get my camera up so I can actually see what's going on here. Here's my crappy little MPK. It's got knobs on. You can see my knobs there. Whoop, whoop. What I'm going to do is hit MIDI map, twiddle the control, twiddle the knob, and then immediately the one thing is associated with the other. So now when I turn my dial, the dial moves on screen. It's super useful. Definitely feel like when you're creating things of an electronic music type thing, you spend a lot of time looking at the screen. Screens aren't really musical instruments, and the more you can do to give yourself a sort of tangible way of working with things, the better off you'll be. I honestly think that's true. Look at the way people perform, not just musicians with guitars, but watch the way, particularly like DJs who work with other equipment, watch how they work. There's not a lot of looking at the screen, and there's a lot of doing things. So if you can set your situation up so that you can physically interact with things, it's more fun and potentially kind of more productive. That didn't work. Click. There we go. All right, now I've got filter cut from resonance. Wonderful. Now, if I want to record that automation, let's think about doing this in the arrange view. Okay. Maybe just mute that for a sec. That's the focus track currently. So if I hit record on my oh, it's because it's from an external input, isn't it? All right. Okay, now I've got record switch. If I'm recording on a track and I twiddle some knobs, what will happen is that information will be recorded in as automation, hopefully, if I've done this right, in Ableton. So given that I've got my filter frequency attached to a control here, here we go. We can see that automation getting recorded across. There it is. On the track. Now, there's a setting for this in the preferences, which is what happens when you press when you're recording automation, is you can actually record automation across all tracks at the same time. So if I happen to have some automation set up on some control set up on analog, and some controls set up on my drum loop there, I can record automation on both tracks at the same time. That may not be useful, so it might just be armed tracks that you want, just to avoid splurging automation across everything all the time. On top of that, with automation turned on, much like any other DAW, you can pick up your automation and move it around. If you want to move one of these lines, I think it's shift, you can hold shift and move those around as well, so it's as functional as any other DAW's automation, to be fair. The automation also exists in the clip though, so if I'm in clip view, I can see what are called envelopes, so automation inside the clip, so I can see all my automatable parameters in here. I think it works the same way as audio, in that if you've got automation on the clip and the clip's playing, that will take precedence over the automation on the arrangement. So it's probably a one or the other situation, just for sort of clarity. But this can be quite useful if you want to just put automation on the clip. So like if you wanted to put your filter sweeps on clips, but have the audio playing off the arrangement, that would work. Okay. I've got one more thing to look at, which is actually quite nice, because I do need to take a break before my next session in a little while. What I'll do is come back to some of the stuff in the next session, in the hope that it's useful stuff to look at, and we'll do a little bit more on sort of effects processing and production stuff specifically. So rather than creating content, more kind of using effects and processes and stuff. But just a couple of things to get you thinking. And perhaps what we should do is just play there. Obviously you just saw me put a filter on that track. Any effects that you put on the track will affect each other in series. So if I put a delay after the filter, the sound will be filtered and then delayed, which sort of makes sense. So you can do fun things like that. You change the order so the delay's first. It's the delayed sound that gets filtered. Okay, so we can definitely say that effects in the chain happen in series. This is called the effects chain, by the way. One thing affects the other. If you want to do things in parallel, so as in your drum loop goes to a delay and separately to another effect, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to make that a filter, because you won't then hear the other sound. But let's say, the way that sends are set up here is we've got on send A is a reverb, and what we've got on send B is a delay. So taking the delay from the chain here, we have reverb and a delay. Critically, the delay and the reverb don't interact with each other, and this might seem obvious for those of you that already understand what an aux send is, because you've been doing this for a while. Effects that are on a channel are in series and happen one after the other and affect the whole sound. Effects that are on sends happen parallel with each other, so the reverb and the delay happen at the same time, parallel to each other, and they only affect part of the sound. Normally, if you turn a send all the way up, you'll have roughly 50-50 mix of the original sound and the thing it's being affected by. I really encourage you to use sends as much as possible, actually, because there's a load of stuff you can do on sends that just make your mix sound better. So for example, using a reverb across elements on a mix, with send A being a reverb here, if I send both the elements of the mix to the reverb, it will have the effect of unifying all the parts of the track. So instead of a completely separate whatever the heck that is, I put in there. That one and a breakbeat, put them both in the same reverb. It sort of has the effect of gluing them together. You can add more sends. You can change what's on the sends. Like, for example, if I wanted to make that reverb bigger, we can just increase the decay time on the reverb. What's quite useful in most types of music is one short reverb, one long reverb, and a delay. The short reverb's useful for drums and things. The long reverb's useful for sort of pads and other sounds. Perhaps a separate one for your vocal. I'm coming to that, Brandon. Sorry, another's delay, but I'm coming to it. If you want more sends, you go create, insert return track, and then you'll get another one. So I could have reverb, delay, and another thing. You can have as many as you like, I think, saying that like I've never tried creating more than 4. But yeah, you can make as many as you like. This is the equivalent of aux sends in Logic Pro and Pro Tools. One thing I think is quite useful is, and I learned this from mixing non-electronic stuff, is sending to a send that's got something really gross on it. Like send C currently is a delay, but let's say that was an amp simulator. A whole load of drive on it. One of the things you get with distortion is it tends to kind of, although it increases the presence and harmonic content of a sound, it'll also tend to take away elements of the sound. So having a dry wet mix of one and the other is quite nice. Another tip that someone told me years ago is to use a filter. I'll do this on the drum break. Is to use a filter on your send. If you want to add weight to a sound, I'm going to put a filter on the send, which you might be able to hear. It's mixed in with the original. If I get the resonance, to the point, I'm on headphones, so it's not really mega apparent. You get the resonance to a point where it's really kind of singing with the bottom end of the drums. It sort of has the effect of fattening up the lower end of the drum break and making it sound a lot more weighty. So that's a send to a filter, which seems like a quite nuts thing to do, but it's quite useful. So experiment with it. Try different things on sends. So I'll finish this off with one thing that I ended up kind of being frustrated with and sort of figured out today, which is if you're working in Logic Pro, for example, and you send your track to an effect like that, a bit of reverb on your drums, what you can do is send the dry thing and the reverb thing to the same place, so you've got one fader for both things. The reason for that I'll explain properly next week, but let me show you how to achieve it to start with in Ableton. I'm going to make a new audio track, and I'm going to call it reverb, and then the input from that track will be from send A, and send A will go nowhere, and then we make this track monitor in all the time. So now the drums are going to send A, over here, and then send out is going back to this track here. And what that means is we can select this track and this track, and we can go, if I can find it, I know what the keyboard command is. There it is, group tracks. We go group tracks. What we now have is one fader that is both of these things together. Which is the sort of thing you can achieve in Logic Pro. Why? Well, I'll tell you next time, if that's okay. All right. That's. I think it covers, at the very least, it covers what we did right back at the beginning of the semester. There's a few bits missing that I'll review next week. So specifically, the stuff on breakbeats I did a couple of weeks ago, and sound creation in analog. But we'll cover it next week. And if that's been helpful to anyone that's at the other end of this, going, I need to know more about Ableton, that's great. If it's been mostly stuff you know, but you've learned a couple of things, that's also good. If it's been mostly stuff you know, but it's made you think, I need to go back to Ableton and have a go at some of this stuff, it's a worthwhile thing to do, even if you've got the formative done, and you're kind of starting to enter chill out mode for the Christmas break. Do try and spend a bit more time with it. I've forced myself to spend a couple of hours on Ableton every week, and I've learnt loads of stuff just through having to think about, things to teach, but also thinking about the way I've been working previously in other doors and what I want to try and achieve. It's been quite rewarding, so persevere with it, I would say. Okay, I will. It always freaks me out when I go back to my main screen, and then I just get copies of myself disappearing into the infinite distance. I'm going to stop this now, and because I've hit the 50-minute mark, which is way beyond what I wanted to do. But I'll leave the Teams chat open for another 5-10 minutes or so. So if anyone's got any questions off the back of all this stuff, then just drop it in the chat there, and I'll try and pick it up. Otherwise, next week it's 10 o'clock a.m. You won't be on site, but I probably will be. So I won't be dealing with my kind of internals of my house. And I'll see you all there. So happy Abletoning, happy EMPing. See you soon.